Hi there, Elevated Planet community. This is John Drew from Elevated Planet, and today I'm with Aiobhinn Murray. Hi there, Aiobhinn. How are you doing?
I'm brilliant. Thanks, John. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you. I am. And I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we did our first In Conversation With episode going back a few months ago. I've been fascinated because I know that the reason we said that we were going to do this was because you started giving us some information there about the shadow aspects, which are important to know, albeit, as we've discussed, it's like an energy thing as well to be aware of how to handle that.
And this is the same with, you were talking about your partner
Yes.
and these entities from the lower astral realm, what Rudolf Steiner would have called the eighth sphere. They are closest to us, to the planet now and to this realm than they have ever been in the history of our species. And they will try to keep, particularly from my experience, they try to attack the light workers. And from my experience, I started experiencing them when I was very young.
Mm,
So my first experience of them was from age 5, and I only remembered it through hypnotherapy.
right.
I was having a session for insomnia because sleeping had always been an issue for me, and
Mm,
I used to scream the house down when I was a little child. I used to scream the house down every night because I didn't want to go to bed. So
mm,
when I had the hypnosis and I traced everything right back, it traced it right back to the age of 5. And it was because of the experiences I started having then with these entities. And because I didn't know I had mediumship abilities at that point. And
mm,
this is a tip for the parents out there. If you have a son or a daughter who's having a lot of fear at night, particularly night terrors, don't
mm,
dismiss that they are, because it could be that they are actually experiencing things, but they don't have the experience to know, they don't have the training to know that they're actually experiencing real entities. Because
mm,
once you have that ability, or you are a very strong light worker, a very strong healer, you shine in the
mm,
non-physical world. So you attract the attention of very benevolent helpers and
mm,
guides. You also attract the attention of nefarious ones too. And this is where guarding ourselves is important, because from my own experience and from learning over a period of time how to stop the attacks, I came to the conclusion it was because there was some sort of sabotage that was being attempted there to stop me doing the work that I didn't know I was here to do at that time.
mm,
I've
mm,
only known in the past few years. Okay, I knew I was here for a reason. I knew I'd been going through all this spiritual training for 30 years for a reason. Okay, now it's been given to me. I know what it is. But at the time, you don't know that. So all you know is you're going into fear. You might be having very physical experiences, which I was having, and your partner may
yes.
have had that as well.
Yes.
And it's very frightening when you have no point of reference for
Mm,
this, and it can be going on for 20 or 30 years. Now, I also feel that I chose to have those experiences, and your partner may have chosen to have those
mm,
experiences before she incarnated so she could learn how to
mm,
be sovereign, because that's what I learned from it. Once I learned how to actually stop this thing of sending them love
yes.
and forming a cord with them
Yeah.
and stop going into fear, because they
Yes.
feed on that and they get bigger and they know that they can manipulate you so easily. So once, the first time I shouted at one of these things and I said, no, this is my realm. You get out of this room and you do not come back.
Mm,
And then it stopped. I was like, oh my God, that worked. So then I started adding more. And then I
yes.
started creating a declaration for myself at night. And since I started using declarations at night to stop the interference happening, there's only been one time since then that I felt one of them latching onto my back. I was turned on my side in bed and my husband wasn't there at the time, and I was turned on my back and I was awake. And
Mm,
I felt that familiar feeling of physical connection on my back, a
mm,
physical being on my back. And instead of going into fear, I went into anger, but I couldn't get myself out of the paralysis. I don't know what you'd call
mm,
it, but I practiced it enough over the last few years, to know that if I'm shouting it enough in my mind, I can make my physical mouth work. So I started roaring in my mind, no, no. And I started actually being very abusive, saying, off.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got the words out, I felt it withdrawing, pulling away from my back. And it hasn't happened since then, because I keep very strong boundaries. So it's not about being fearful, because a lot of light workers think that you're being fearful if you're putting a guard around yourself. You know, you're saying, this is my space, this is my territory. You do not overstep this territory. And this is what I mean about coming more into our adulthood as spiritual workers, rather than just, it's all love and light. And, you know, this stuff doesn't, if I don't look at it, it doesn't happen. I didn't look at it at the age of 5. It happened for years. You know, I was brought up in the Catholic Church. So, you know, I was brought up in a religion. So you would think that it shouldn't happen in that case. So I think we have to be a bit more mature at this point.
Yes. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, I know, I think it's Jolie said to me before, critters are attracted towards the light, right? That's kind of, which is exactly the point you make, right?
I would totally agree with her. Yeah.
And it's something that I have learned to do for myself. And I don't believe I've ever been under any such attack as my partner has. But she does this as well, which is surrounds herself with light, you know, on a regular basis. And again, it's just you know, your own little visual thing, and you're actually saying it and you're feeling it, and it can actually create this, you know, boundary. And it's like I have this thing where I think of this white pyramid of protection, right? It's a white pyramid of protection and only allows the light in. I have never been through one of those experiences that I have an awareness of. Who knows? If I have some regression therapy, maybe I'll find out otherwise. But I'm not familiar with that. But I think what was really interesting, we mentioned Dolores Cannon earlier. What she would do was the regression therapy, and she would dig into people's past lives, but also a myriad of other things that came through during the decades that she did this. But there was one entity in particular who was very dark. I mean, the darkest she'd ever come across. But it wasn't, you know, obviously the fellow who was under hypnosis was the one who was effectively in the room with this man, who just felt like pure evil. That was, this is not typical, because her work this is the only time I've ever seen this within all these books that she's ever written. So it's not like she's writing a horror story. This is kind of for real. All she ever did was recorded verbatim what happened. And on this particular case, before she went in, she was smart enough to give everybody protection. So before she sent this fellow, whose name was John, off on this journey, she gave him the protection. And she gave other people the protection that were around. She forgot to give herself protection, right? She'd been told that she should always give herself protection. So even though he was the spirit who was effectively in the room, in a physical room with someone somewhere else in the world, halfway around the world from where they were, in a physical room, but he could feel the evil, and that spirit knew he was there. That the man concerned, who was a physical person, knew he was there, because he's very, very wise to this stuff. But he couldn't see him at the time, but he knew he was there, and he had to back away because but Dolores Cannon, who was just there recording this and asking the questions, she got the job. She was the one who got physically attacked in the chair, pushed back. So from half a world away, she was on, and it's the only time it ever happened, and she never forgot to put the protection on her ever again, herself ever again. But that was it. She said that was the answer. There was like she had to protect herself, and that one time she didn't, when there was this really dark presence, super dark presence, then she really, I mean, she physically felt that for a long time afterwards and would never forget it for the rest of her life. But yeah, and even after that, the fellow who was concerned, this entity was then trying to get to him, but never could, because he was always protecting himself after that. But he had to do it. But effectively, it kind of created a wall around him. He even kind of woke up. It felt like he was awake, but he was asleep. But he could see this man trying to get in and work out how to get in. But he knew the reason he couldn't get in was because of the barrier that he had created around himself. And I know this sounds like, I mean, you get it, I get it. And, you know, a lot of people who've been looking at this stuff do understand that. But obviously, from a mainstream perspective, it all sounds a little bit fantastical, you know, creating a barrier just through your thought and your heart, you know, working together. And I think that's another point that I was going to mention as well. You talk about the heart as the portal, right? It's the motherboard of the body, if you like, and the connection to so many things. But having the heart-mind coherence, I hear a lot of talk around that, about the importance of that, working together as a unit. So like, because we so, again, a lot of us left brainers, kind of, we live in the mind. And that was part of my world for many decades, not allowing enough of the right brain through, but then learning that actually, yeah, the heart is very important, but having the connection, heart-mind connection, you can work on that.
Absolutely. And for anybody who doesn't have any information about this, just look up the HeartMath Institute. They've been doing this, working with the science of this for years and years. So you can do your own research into it and find out that it's very, very, very real. And when you have the two aligned, the mind and the heart, you are a force to be reckoned with. You are, right, really are. But you know, you make a good point there with the conditioning to be very in the kind of the left brain and staying very logically minded. And it is a challenge for a lot of people, myself included, when I started off because of my own conditioning. But it comes with, you learn about your power through experiencing it. So I would suggest that even if you don't believe in this stuff, just pretend for 5 minutes that it's real. And whatever intuitive instincts you get coming in, go with it just once, see what happens. And the more you do that, the more you actually see the proof. See, this is all experiential. You can't read, I mean, you can read this from a book, but it has to be, it can't just be a concept. It has to be experienced by the individual, because that's where the proof lies. And people are so incredibly powerful, and that it has been trained out of them from the year dot, from the time that they're born. Like I said, it's a very slick operation on this planet. So it's conditioned out of you from the time that you arrive onto the planet, your own power, and you're put into various different systems, and you must follow these systems. And when you start working with those higher aspects of yourself and you start getting dividends from it, you start benefiting from it, and you start seeing that this actually works, it gets stronger. It's like a muscle. You have to flex it, you have to use it in order for it to work. And it does take practice. But when you see it the first time you see it, and you realize, gosh, this is real, you see it working in your own life, then that inspires you to keep going. And that's when you start learning about the power that humanity has. And that's why humanity has had to be dumbed down for such a long time, because we are such powerful beings.
Yes.
The only way to control us is to put fluoride in our water, to keep our pineal gland messed up, and to keep our intuition messed up, to keep us dumbed down, keep us in all these systems, keep us divided. You must believe this, and these people have to hate these people have to hate these people. And it always amazes me how people can't see the ones behind them that are giving them the rockets to throw at each other, you know.
Yes.
It still amazes me, but it is the way it is.